Sorry.
Hi, I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm Beth Baird, coordinator of the Treasure Valley Clean Cities Coalition in Idaho. And I'm so glad that everyone could join us here today. This webinar should be able to help answer your questions concerning the use of propane as a vehicle fuel, particularly in school buses. Propane's not widely been used and adopted well in Idaho, but it is routinely used and has been successful in many different schools and school districts across the United States. Currently, there are 7 school districts in Idaho that are using propane, and we'd like to see more propane used because it is a good, clean fuel, very appropriate for school buses. Again, thanks for joining us, and I think you'll find the webinar very, very informative. And I'm not sure who's next, either Alicia, Ed, or Adam. Sorry.
I'll go ahead to just follow up with the Clean Cities theme right now. So hi everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Alicia Cox. I am Executive Director of Yellowstone Teton Clean Cities. As you notice, Beth and I have Clean Cities in our name. We are both part of the Department of Energy's Clean Cities program. There's about 100 other coalitions like ourselves throughout the country. And we work with government, business, individuals to help connect them with the right fuel that meets the needs of their vehicles. So as Beth had mentioned, propane is a very appropriate fuel for school buses, and we hope that you will have all your questions answered. I really focus my work and efforts in Wyoming, Montana, and Eastern Idaho. So feel free to reach out to both Beth and I after this webinar if you have any more questions. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, my name is Ed Dumeyer. I'm with ROUSH Clean Tech, and there's another guy on the screen here, Adam. Welcome. We both share similar titles. We're business development managers for ROUSH Clean Tech. And this is kind of going to be our agenda today. I'm going to start off with the presentation of propane autogas, and then I'll hand it off to Adam, and he'll finish up the presentation. We're going to have Madison School District 321, Marianne Nielsen, speak today, and she has a little video too as well. And the next person would be Huntley Project Schools, Scott Gerke, then Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, Michael Brown, and then we're going to go to Montana Clean School Bus Program, Neil Ullman, and we'll finish up with Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, the last presentation. Then we'll take questions, and hopefully we can answer all those questions at the very end. So I'd like to start right now. Adam, if you want to go ahead and control that. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We want to talk a little bit about C3H8, which is propane. It's clean. It's abundant energy in the United States. It has 3 carbon atoms, 8 hydrogen atoms. We use it for fuel. We use it for cooking on our gas grills. It's clean. It's effective. And again, it's abundant in the United States, and we are energy independent with it. It has about 100 to 150-year heritage. It's used in automobiles around the world. It's domestically produced, like I said. The infrastructure is already in place, and it's about 40 to 50% lower cost than diesel or gasoline. So right now, ROUSH has over about 20,000 school buses running on propane in the United States and Canada. And over 1,000 school districts use the propane vision buses made by Bluebird. Bluebird has produced 6 times more alternative fuel buses than all the other competitors combined. So we have a unique relationship. ROUSH Clean Tech has a unique relationship with Bluebird in that we provide Bluebird with a 6.8 liter propane engine and gasoline engine with a 6R140 Ford transmission. The engine is also Ford's. Some of the things that we do at ROUSH, besides go fast, we really go fast. And then when it's not fast enough, we go faster than that. So if you look at this right-hand side, you see that we're involved in motorsports, Ford, Valvoline, all the NASCAR promotions that we do. We actually run 2 cars in the NASCAR series. We also are involved in entertainment, which is Disney rides. we make all of those complicated undercarriage holders that hold the roller coasters on those rails. That's kind of where our bailiwick is. That's right in our wheelhouse. It's a low volume, high liability business, and that's where ROUSH lives. We also provide a lot of vehicles and different configurations for the Defense Department, things that can be dropped out of airplanes with a parachute, end up in the desert, and then when we're done with it, we throw a couple grenades on it, and we get out of there. We're also involved in the transportation with all the manufacturers that make anything that moves. This is just a smattering with the Ford, Chrysler, GM, Toyota, Honda offering. And just one note right here, we have 3 buildings at ROUSH that do nothing but test the world's engines. We put all of those engines through their paces, give them a non-biased report, let them know that their engine will hold up, whether it's a snow machine Bombardier engine or whether it's a 12-cylinder MAN diesel engine. We can test the world's engines at ROUSH, and again, that's one of our big places, that's one of our big areas that we use to keep ourselves connected with all of the people that make combustion engines. Oh, and by the way, we're one of the last places in the United States that can rebuild the P-51 Mustang engine for the FAA. So here's a good smattering of what the school bus volume looks like in the United States. You can see the upper Midwest and the East Coast have the most volume, and rightly so. That's where the most of the population is. But we have buses in every state, and you'll notice that we have buses, and each one of these green birds will not just be one bus. This could be a fleet of 20 or 50. In Canada, it's really unusual because we go pretty far north. And one thing to note, especially if you live in cold country, a lot of you do, is those buses are really comfortable at -40 below zero to start. They don't need a block heater to be plugged in. They don't need much time to warm up. And propane just seems to migrate towards the colder climates. It's really, really effective. And that's kind of what I wanted to say about the Canadian provinces. So looking at Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, you can see we got a few birds in there. Some of those districts have more than one bus, of course. And we're starting to get a toehold a little bit more in each one of those states, thanks to some really good people at Bluebird, and to Adam as well, because this is partly his territory. And that just gives you a good visual. If you ever want that, or you want to know the school districts in any one of these states, just give us a buzz. We'll give you our contact information at the end of this. So we start off with the Ford 6.8 liter V10 engine. It's a high volume production engine. There's 3 to 4 million of these engines currently on the road in the United States in some configuration or another. They might be propane, or they might be gasoline, or there might be some CNGs running around with that engine. But coming soon, and sometime in April, we're going to come out with a brand new 7.3 liter from the ground up V8 engine. It's going to be meaner, leaner, and greener. And we've done a ton of testing, again, at our dynamometers for the last 2 years to prove that that engine is reliable. We're very excited about that. And the 7.3 liter scales, you can see what we're going to be putting them in. Anything from class 2 to 7, which could be a bread truck, could be a school bus, could be a dumpster, a Ford F-250, a box truck, delivery, even a motorhome. So, and again, there's wide usage and parts support, and there's a lot of experience with that engine. Now, I mentioned that Ford, we build this engine in conjunction with Ford for purpose-built. Purpose-built means that when that order is taken at Ford and the block goes down the assembly line, it gets different pieces than a gasoline engine would get. We use Inconel, and that's an alloy that can withstand the higher temperatures because propane delivers a high BTU level, or excuse me, yes, and it is dry. It's a drier fuel than what we're used to. And it can take out the valve seats, and we use Inconel so the engine will last longer. We are a quality vehicle modifier, meaning that we have the permission from Ford to make modifications to the engine, and they will give their blessings on it. Here's an example of a bus, kind of the layout of the system that we deal with. If you start from the rear end, you've got the fuel tanks that are in between the frame rails, behind the rear axle for protection. Coming up front, we've got a fuel fill. It uses a 5-micron filter as a filter for the first time, and then we have another 2-micron in the system later on. We have stainless steel fuel lines. We don't believe in rubber fuel lines, so we use stainless steel fuel lines. And we have special injectors in the engine that you can see in blue. We also make the fuel rail out of billet aluminum at ROUSH. It's a special fuel rail that is the correct diameter for liquid propane to be transferred to the injector and into the combustion chamber. It's all controlled by the FRPCM, which is the fuel rail pressure control module. And it dovetails with the Bluebird module and with the Ford module on the school bus to communicate to each other what's going on. And so that's a good cutaway of what we're dealing with. The Bluebird Vision bus has now 2 engines. It's got a 6.8 liter V10, and then, like I said, in April, with a new launch from Bluebird, it'll have a 7.3 engine in it. There are different applications with wheelbases from 169 to 280 inches. We have 3 fuel tank capacities. We got 47 usable, 67 usable, and 93 gallons usable for long range. The technical specifications would be for EPA and CARB approval. We are approved by both of those, and you can order them from Bluebird dealers.
Great. Thank you, Ed. That was a great intro, great overview. Ed knows more about engines and transmissions. Well, Ed's forgot more than I know. I guess I'll put it that way. Thanks, Ed. That was great. So my name is Adam Wilcom. I am a business development manager with ROUSH as well, the same as Ed. I look after a sizable portion of the U.S. and Canada. I reside in Michigan, but I do look after Wyoming and Montana. I get out there several times a year under normal circumstances, but this year, obviously, I'm stuck at home like much of you are. So I wanted to go through the second half of this presentation here and just go through some of the things that really factor into a decision to switch to an alternative fuel. We talked to a lot of folks that have hesitation over infrastructure, range of the buses, cost. There's a whole host of things that go into making a decision like this. We've all been running diesel buses, or 80% of schools in the U.S. are still running diesel buses, and it's been that way for a long time. So the one thing that I will say about infrastructure is it is very low cost. Many times you can get infrastructure for no cost out of pocket at a school district. So how that works is you would sign a purchase agreement. You buy your first 2-3 buses, and you sign an agreement with a company like AmeriGas to buy fuel for 2 years, and they'll tack 3 or 4 cents per gallon onto that fuel, and that'll pay for your filling station. So you're talking a $20,000 fuel station, all in, including permits and everything else. And companies like AmeriGas, Ferrogas, CHS, they all handle that process. So you can see here, there's all different types. You can get a fancy in-ground dispenser, or you can do a temporary setup just to try it. If you want to get one bus and just try it out to see if it's right for you, you can get something like what's down here in the lower corner here, just a portable option. And that's what a lot of school districts do when they're first getting in. So when you talk about fueling specifically, it's very similar to gasoline or diesel. There's a secure connection, and in that sense, it's actually better. There's no chance that any propane could spill. There's a magnetic connection on the fill nozzle and on the bus, and if that's not connected, then no propane will transfer. The nice thing about propane is it's non-toxic and non-carcinogenic. So one thing that I remember, I used to have a diesel truck back when I was younger, and that smell that it left on your hand after you filled the bus. I know a lot of drivers really don't like that. So you don't have that with propane. It transfers at the same speed as gasoline or diesel, so there's no slowdown in fueling. And like I said before, the cost of the infrastructure can be included in the per gallon price. It's also important to note there's currently federal funding available for not only the buses, but for the fueling infrastructure as well. So I'll talk about that a little later. But some of the challenges that that you all are going through right now, and these things for the bus fleet operators listening in, this is going to be not news to you, but the manual regen process of the diesel buses, the smell that makes inside the bus, adding diesel exhaust fluid, having to plug the buses in when they come in off the runs, having the Webasto preheaters, the fuel blending that goes on. That's actually a picture. That filter right there is a picture of what happens if you were to run summer diesel in your buses in the wintertime. That's the whole fuel system just gels up, which is, I've seen it happen, unfortunately, quite a few times in October, November, when we start getting those early freezes. And then labor costs. We have a lot of folks in Canada that actually pay drivers to come in early to start the buses, so they're warmed up in time for everybody else to come in and drive them on routes. It takes that long. And then, of course, idling buses in the cold temperatures. Of course, we don't, want buses idling any more than they need to. It's detrimental to the emission systems on diesel engines, and it also, adds additional pollutants into the environment. So, the good thing is with propane, you can erase all of these challenges. No more regens, no exhaust fluid. You don't have to plug the buses in. We have some great videos out of Minnesota of folks coming in at -40. And just starting the buses up and driving them off the lot 5 minutes later. So it really is a huge improvement in a cold weather environment. These are some of the parts and pieces on the diesel engines now. I'm not going to go into too technical details on these, but you're talking tens of thousands of dollars for all of these parts and pieces. With propane engines, you eliminate the need for these. Every single part that you see on this page is to control the emissions, the tailpipe emissions of a diesel engine to meet the current EPA and CARB standards. So we're currently meeting those standards and actually exceeding those standards today. And one thing, a bit of news for you transportation directors that are on the line here, diesel is going to change again. So all of these parts and pieces are on your current engines. By 2027, you're going to have more components. So CARB, which is the California Air Resource Board, which they make their own emission standards, and a lot of other states follow those standards, like New York, Illinois, there's a handful of others, but they're requiring emission standards to be even more stringent by 2024 and 2027. So if you're currently purchasing diesel buses, I'll just advise you, this component here on the left-hand side of the screen is actually an SCR system like you have on your buses now that's being added to the turbo of a diesel engine. So that's coming in 2024. So one important thing to note that our current LPG, our current propane engines meet the 2027 standard right now today. So if you were to decide to switch to propane for the foreseeable future, the life of those buses, you would not need to deal with any additional emissions components yet being added to your buses. Just some of the prices here. So these are, I like to call this these budget busters. You all have your M&O budgets that you have to put together at the beginning of the year. If you lose like a turbo and a set of injectors, you're $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 just in one repair to keep a bus on the road. We've had so many school districts. I go and visit them, and they've got these buses that are 4 or 5 years old, just parked, in the back lot. And the reason they're not using them anymore is because something happened to the bus, and they literally do not have the money to get it repaired. So it's really kind of a shame, where this has gone. But again, the good thing, we're here to just educate you about a better way to do this. So with the Ford engine and the propane fuel system, there's really not a lot of expensive components that can fail. So it really helps protect that budget and use it for more important things, and just lets you sleep better at night. I guess I would say that you're not going to have to wake up to a $10,000 repair on Monday morning. When you talk about cost of ownership, so this is cost of ownership really isn't widely used in the school bus industry, but in the trucking industry, it's more prevalent because fleet owners, they're out there trying to make money with their vehicles, so they want to know what trucks are costing them money, what trucks aren't costing them money, what the best way to go about, transporting goods from point A to point B has been. So we like to look at it this way as well. We put a school bus lens on it. This is kind of a complicated way to look at it. We've got a more simpler way, which I'll tell you in a second. But the gist of it is you can use this for your own fleet. You can put in what you're paying for fuel now, whether you're using gasoline, diesel, whether you have electric buses. You put in your miles per gallon. You put in how many years you're going to keep the buses, what the buses are going to cost you to purchase, how many miles a year you run, and any federal or state grants that you're going to get. So if you were going to get a $25,000 subsidy from, say, the state of Montana for an alternative fuel bus, you could go ahead and you could type that in here and it would reflect the cost per mile for that vehicle. And we also have some preventative maintenance things in here like oil changes and some other diesel exhaust fluid for the diesel buses, fuel filters. You can see here propane does pretty good. I mean, right now we have school districts. I had a school district in Illinois this year lock into a 2-year price purchase contract for 79 cents a gallon. 85 cents is pretty good for a large fleet. Prices on gas and diesel are maybe a little higher than this right now. They could be lower too. It depends on how much you buy. It's different for that's why we let you put your own numbers in here, because it's different for everyone. So, but you can see here, I mean, even compared to, with no grants or anything, you can see 64 cents a mile for propane versus 69 cents for diesel. And that's not including any of those expensive repairs that I just was talking about. So, it really, from a financial standpoint, really makes a lot of sense. So the easier way to do it that I mentioned, we do have that calculator on our website. So if you were to go to roushcleantech.com /school bus calculator, you can enter in all that same information and you're going to get a personalized report emailed to you that you could take and maybe discuss with the superintendent or school board. It's in a really nice format and it just, it's much easier than having to use that Excel spreadsheet that we used previously. So this webinar is being recorded, so there will be a copy sent out where you can get this website address from. But I would advise, if you're thinking about making the switch to propane or EV or gasoline, go on and use this calculator and just kind of see where it shakes out for your particular fleet. I talked about some federal subsidies that are available. So we've got some 36 cent per gallon credit for every gallon of propane that you use in your fleet. You're going to get 36 cents back. That does expire at the end of 2020, but we do fully anticipate for it to be renewed in 2021. This program has been around since 2008, so we don't think that it's going anywhere anytime soon. And that includes 30% of the cost for infrastructure. If you want to go out and you decide, you know what, we're not buying any more diesel buses, we're going all in with propane, well, you can buy your own fueling station and you can get 30% of the cost back for that. Unless you're buying, putting in a 50,000 gallon tank, I don't see that exceeding $30,000. So that's another way that you can save money when you switch to alternative fuel like propane. We'll talk about the emissions side of it. So this is an important factor. We're under a lot of public pressure these days to lower our environmental footprint, lower tailpipe emissions. There's a lot of funding out there for vehicle purchases when you do this. And you can see here with propane, very low tailpipe emissions. We're 70% lower than the EPA CARB standards currently, even on things like greenhouse gases, which is more geared towards climate change. And this top category, this is all geared more towards, these pollutants have effect on human health. So things like childhood asthma, things like smog, that's where these top 5 categories are going to come in, and you can see how much better we do on those. I had a school district in Chicago that actually decided to go with propane buses because they had an air intake into a school that was right near where the buses picked up kids at the end of the day. And the diesel emissions were actually getting inside the building and making people sick. So they needed something that was going to, have lower emissions. And that's why they chose to go to propane, just for that reason alone. So that is the great benefit to switching to an alternative fuel like this. We do have an option if you want to, be a real overachiever. We do have an option for a 90% cleaner engine, which is our 0.02, which is, like it says there, 90% cleaner than the federal standard. I'll talk just for a second about safety. I'll go through a few of these pretty quickly for time's sake, but we do go overboard with safety. We're not transporting milk. We are taking kids to and from school. So when it comes to the safety aspect of these vehicles, we really do exceed, we go above and beyond, I think, what's used in a lot of other industries. So we do test these tanks to 4 times their working pressure, which is 1,200 PSI. And we make sure that they meet all the National Fire Protection guidelines for vehicles. And they are rated for the life of the vehicle. In the past, if you're familiar with CNG, there was an expiration date on those tanks. With propane, that isn't the case. So you could keep this bus in service for 20 years and you would never have to switch out the tanks. You can see here we do mount them in between the frame rails, or rather Bluebird mounts them in between the frame rails. It's mainly for crash protection, so those things are well shielded from any kind of accident that the bus might be in. And when you talk about test requirements, so we do Canadian motor vehicle safety standards. They're a little more stringent than the US standards. So we take this 4,000-pound sled and we crash it directly into the fuel tank, which is a pretty violent test. And there needs to be no leakage or pressure drop for 30 minutes, which is that's about as good as it gets. I think you can see here that angled impact. That would be truly a worst case scenario. So in summary, we have a great engine. We have a great platform that is extremely reliable. It's tried and true. We have a great service network. So that's another thing that when I talk to folks about propane, they think, well, I'm going to need these specialized tools and training. Well, it's basically a gasoline engine. When you get down to the heart of this thing, it's a gas engine. The fuel system is very simple. So in one way, it's almost easier for a school district to hire mechanics to work on these things, because it's easier to find somebody that knows how to work on a gasoline engine versus somebody that knows how to work on a diesel engine these days. Good diesel mechanics are getting paid, a lot of money these days because they're in short supply. There's just more gasoline mechanics out there. We are extremely clean, meet EPA and exceed CARB standards. No after treatment, which is great. It's a domestic fuel. It's not subject to the wild price swings like gasoline and diesel is. And actually, propane is a byproduct from CNG production. So a huge amount of the US is powered by CNG as far as our electrical grid. So propane is really just a waste product of CNG production. So I don't really see that going away in the near future. And it's easy to scale. That's one thing that I love about propane is, it's almost as easy to put one bus on the road as put 30 on the road. There's just not a whole lot that needs to change as far as your daily operating schedule or your infrastructure to get that done. So, and one thing just in closing, I'll say there was some apprehension. I know out here in the West, you travel some pretty good miles. And, the concern was brought up by some school districts that it was maybe difficult to get fuel if you went on a field trip with a bus. So, if you were, it's great, running your normal route, coming back to the yard every day, but if you needed to go 200, 300, 400 miles on a field trip, it was kind of difficult to get propane. The good thing about it is you can use an app like the Department of Energy has a great app to find propane fueling stations. And even companies like U-Haul are in the middle of vastly upgrading their services so they can even be equipped to fuel a propane school bus. So we've been on some presentations this year with U-Haul reps, and they've talked quite a bit about really wanting to, they've realized how many of these propane school buses on the road now, and they want to be able to be a resource for school districts to stop and fill their buses at their facilities. So, great thing happening, over 20,000 buses on the road now. It's really, alternative fuel is really becoming almost mainstream in this sense. It's really taken off like a rocket. So, with that, I want to thank everybody for being on. I want to thank everybody for listening to learning more about an alternative fuel like propane. It's a great option for school districts, and there's a lot of funding out there right now. With that, with the funding piece, we'll talk about that a little later. We're going to hear from the state of Idaho and the state of Montana. But before we get there, I wanted to give a few school districts the chance to kind of tell their story with propane, because we've got some of your peers right in your backyard that are using this currently. So I think it's best to let them tell their story and kind of let them share their experience with you. First up, we're going to have Madison School District, which is in Rexburg, Idaho. We're going to have Mary Ann Nielsen. She's going to talk for a few minutes about their experience, and then we've got a great video to show that features her drivers. So Mary Ann, are you on the line? Sometimes it takes just a minute to get, yep, there you are. Hi, Mary Ann.
Hi. Thank you. I really appreciate this time to talk about our propane buses. We really do like them here. We are, again, in Rexburg, Idaho, where it's kind of cold. The last couple mornings, it's definitely been cold out here. First of all, they asked me to talk a little bit about why we decided to go with propane. And like most districts, after the 2010 emissions came out on the diesels, we all ran into some issues with the regen, the buses gelling up, the restarts, you know, the old saying, if your bus has got an alarm going off, pull over, turn it off, start it again, hopefully the bus will take off, the alarm systems go off. So we were running into a lot of issues, and when Adam showed us the costs there, am I still on? Am I still there?
This is Michael Brown. I'm hearing you.
Oh, you're hearing me? Okay.
I seem to have lost the presentation.
Oh, sorry about that. Little technical hiccup, but we got you back. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Michael. So anyway, basically we were starting with the issues and spending a lot of cost on our buses with the regen issues. And I was at the SDN conference back in 2013, maybe it was 2014, and went to a presentation on propane. After the presentation, I visited with a gentleman from, I believe it was Texas, and he was really happy with his propane and what was going on. So we came back and looked into them and visited with our dealer, and spent probably a good another year, 2 years talking about which direction we wanted to go. And so we decided to jump on board and try the propane. So in 2015, we purchased our first 2 buses and have been happy ever since. Right now I have a fleet of 50 buses, and 24 of those buses are propane. So we're really happy with our propanes. Probably the biggest thing right now is the maintenance costs. We're not having, you know, cross my fingers, knock on wood, but the maintenance issues with the propanes have been very, very low, very, very low cost. A few, you know, there's not a perfect bus out there, but it's been so much lower than the emission buses. Pros and cons wise, probably the biggest thing that we all struggle as supervisors with transportation is getting drivers. It seems like it's extremely hard to get drivers. I was once told if you give somebody a nice office, give them a warm office, and let them enjoy coming to work, that they'll come to work for you. So once we received and started using the propane buses and everybody was happy with them, we found out that we bought the best offices that our drivers wanted. So with that, if you want to show the little video I have, Adam, that will they can tell their own story.
Yeah, it's great. I love that office analogy. It's just so perfect. I love that you shared that with us. I'll go ahead and start this video now.
The first thing that I love about my propane bus is that it is so quiet. Compared to the diesel buses with the motor inside, it was very noisy and made it a little harder to concentrate. This is so quiet, it's like driving your car. So what I love about my propane bus also is that I drove a diesel bus before that had a burn system, and so the smell of the exhaust was extremely strong inside the bus, and it was a constant problem to let it idle at all. This bus, you can let it idle for a few minutes, and then you never have that smell of diesel. So it's wonderful.
What I like about driving this propane bus, is the functionality of the area around the driver's seat. I feel like I'm flying an airplane. I have these buttons, but they're actually easy to use and they're easy to locate. I do not care for the buses that have you have to open up the door with your arm. That is bothersome if you have shoulder problems. I open up here, I push my button here, I activate my lights here. One of the things I love is the heater. The heaters warm up the bus very nicely. That's problematic with some of the other buses. It's just a pure pleasure to drive this bus.
That's such a great video. I love it.
So basically that's the main testimony of this is if our drivers enjoy them, they get the kids to and from school in a safe manner. And again, we're up here where it's kind of cold, and with our diesel buses gelling up, leaving the students out stranded on the roads. Yes, cost is very important, but the safety of our students is very important too. And I think that's kind of the biggest reason that, and the maintenance cost is why we went with propane. We're happy with it. As far as fueling, we just stay with our local dealers right now. We do not have infrastructure that we go to. In the future, I think we will. And then also, we do still have the diesel buses, and we probably will keep buying diesel, but the diesel will be for our long trips, our athletic trips. And if we need to run over to Boise, of course, it's a lot easier to get diesel than propane. I haven't looked into those yet. As far as power-wise, of course, the diesel definitely has a lot more power for these drivers but if you're using them for a route bus, we're not in a hurry anyway, so the power has not been an issue for us. We really enjoy them, we like them, and then it is nice to let the community know that we are working on the clean air, and it's important to us. We want to give back to our community the right way, so it's been a great investment for us here at Madison School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate you telling your story. So next up, we're going to have, let's see here. We're going to have Scott Gerke, who is the Transportation Director for Huntley Project Schools in Warden, Montana. And Scott's going to kind of do the same as Mary Ann, just kind of give a brief overview of how they came to land on propane for their fleet. Scott, are you on?
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Scott.
How you doing?
Good.
Well,
good.
First, I'd just like to say thank you to Adam and John Massaro for inviting me. I'm a real big fan of ROUSH. I think they're a class act, good training, good support. If you ever need help, was the biggest deal for us in deciding to go with these propane buses, is the amount of help we got with technological, the apparatus as far as the operations end of the ROUSH products. Some of the other big items were noise. The propane buses are extremely quiet. In fact, some of the drivers commented, wow, I never heard all them kids talking before. So there was a lot of things like that. One of the big things I really like about them is the difference in that you have not messing with all the pollution control. There's like some of our buses, we've counted them up, and some of them have 8 to 10 filters on the diesel buses. Our maintenance guy can do maintenance on a propane bus way faster than you can on a diesel bus. The power with that V10 Ford seems to be really good. Haven't had any problems that way. The other thing they did is they coupled it with that Ford transmission, and I'll be the first one to tell you I'm a Mopar guy, but I'll also tell you when it comes to that V10 and it comes to that Ford transmission, there probably isn't a better combination out there. They hold up really well. The other part of it is we were able to get DEQ grants and local grants from our propane dealer, that once we sat there and figured it out, just the grant I got from my propane dealer basically paid for the fuel that we ran out of that bus in the first year. We have 5 of those buses now, and I've only had 2 warranty issues, which weren't big deals at all. ROUSH took care of them. You get your parts overnight air, slam them in there, you're good to go. Another thing I really like about them is the idle time. So we don't plug our propane buses in. They're in unheated barns. That's enough. Another plus for us is we're not having to keep them in a heated barn. So we save a lot of money on utilities that way too. So, and again, it doesn't use DEF and all the issues that come around Nobody seems to understand the whole DEF situation and how to do a regen. And, you know, even some of the older, more experienced drivers have had problems with that, which if you've dealt with those items, you know they can become really expensive really quick. I do recommend that you do ROUSH's training. I've done it twice and it's very good training. And we're able to get all the help we needed with all that stuff. I guess that's about it for what I have.
Hey, that's great, Scott. Great story. You know, it just sounds like it's working well for you. Same with Mary Ann. It's just, you know, a solution to a problem. I mean, that's kind of what we like to tell people when we're educating them. You know, you've got problems. We try to give you a solution to those problems. So I'm glad you're having such a good experience. And thanks again for being on this afternoon. So next up, we are going to have Michael Brown from the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. And Michael is going to talk about some funding that's available in Idaho. Go ahead, Michael.
Great, thanks. Hopefully everybody can hear me. If I cut out, feel free to interrupt me, and happy to take questions in the end. If you go to the next slide. So we have a vehicle replacement program that's funded by two main funding sources. One is our VW settlement fund, of which we've completed application rounds for 2 years for vehicle replacement rebates. And we also use our DERA funding, EPA DERA grants, as a funding source. And so what we'll do is we'll have an application period, and then we will evaluate the applications and evaluate the buses. Essentially what it is it's a swap. You propose vehicles for scrappage. So the vehicles need to be permanently disabled by drilling a 3-inch hole in the engine block and cutting the chassis frames in half on both sides. Like I said, we've had a cycle in 2019, a cycle in 2020. The cycle in 2019 was, I think, about 8 million. And the cycle that we just completed was about 4.5 or 5. We will have, we do have funding available left over from our VW settlement fund and some from our DERA grant. We get the DERA grants each year, and depending on how much we get in the grants will determine the total estimated funding. We have about $2.5 million left of our VW settlement fund. And so we'll combine that with remaining DERA funds and upcoming DERA funds for our 2021 funding cycle. Both of those are essentially to be determined, because since we have two concurrently running replacements cycles, so we have two sets of applications that are at varying stages of being complete, so it's a constant workload. We'll be assessing, you know, where we stand. We just completed getting all of our draft agreements out to participants for our 2020 cycle. We'll be getting those back from our participants and finalizing those agreements as they come in. So we're just not 100% sure of when we'll have that 2021 funding cycle yet, but I'm guessing that it will be sometime in 2021. If I had to give an unofficial guess, I'm going to say it'd probably be around May or June before we offer that up. Next slide. So our 2019 and our 2020 cycles went. These are the funding, the rebate funding percentages that we used for each cycle. And so you'll see it depends on what you're replacing your diesel bus with. So if you're a government-owned entity and you're going diesel for diesel, it's 25%. For alternate fuel like propane or CNG, we provide 40% of a rebate toward the purchase of a new bus. And for going from diesel to all electric, it's 45%. Those aren't really, that's not part of the topic of today, but also with the electric, we'll pay for 45% of the cost of charging infrastructure for new all-electric vehicles. Unfortunately, both the VW settlement and the DEER grants don't provide infrastructure reimbursement for alternate fuels. This is likely the percentages that we would use for our 2021 cycle. If we do have any changes, it will be part of the application guidance package that we put out there with the applications themselves. Next slide. So the vehicle eligibility differs slightly for the funding source. So what we do is we put together a package, an application guidance package in our announcement that gives the vehicle eligibility. And typically what we'll say is that it really need only be a 2009 or older. Because what we will do is when we get the applications in, if you have a 1997 bus, obviously that would fit under our VW settlement because it needs to be only a 2009 or older. But we would evaluate the different criteria that's required from our EPA DERA grants, which all those requirements I didn't list here because it made the table too small and you wouldn't be able to read it. But the main criteria is going to be the engine model year of the vehicle being scrapped. So if you're between 95 and 06, you would be eligible under our FY18 grant, and you'd also be eligible under our FY20 state and FY20 national DERA grant. What we try to do is we try to use as much of our DERA grant funding as possible. So if your vehicle meets not only the engine model year requirement, but the minimum usage requirements, some of our grants require that you have to have 7,000 miles per year for the 2 years prior to the replacement in order to be eligible. Our FY20 national grant is like that. And our FY20, some of our other grants have certain requirements about an attrition statement that the applicant would attest that they have at least 3 remaining years of life left on a vehicle. So that just means they have to prepare a letter that they sign that says, here's the vehicle that we have. If it weren't for this funding opportunity, we would be keeping this bus within our fleet for the next 3 years or a particular date. So if your vehicle meets those requirements, we would fund that bus replacement. As long as it was going diesel for diesel, we would replace that vehicle under a DERA grant. The reason we don't do that with our propane vehicles is because the DERA grants provide a lesser rebate for those alternate fueled vehicles. I think that the percentage is 35%, whereas with our VW settlement, we'll offer 40%. So in the interest of giving applicants, more of a rebate than we would provide, that funding under the VW settlement so that they could get more funding. So I was trying to think if there's anything different. I mean, the only thing that would be different from a 2021 cycle is that the FY18 grant wouldn't be part of it because I think we've spent that one down 100%. We're pretty close on our FY20 state and national. Or no, the FY20 national will go away because we've expended that 100%. I think we have around 300,000 on our FY20 state and around 2.5 million on our VW settlement. And we would expect to get FY21 grants issued to us in October of 2021, but we would know if those were going to be at play for our next cycle earlier on. The next slide. So our VW website, I posted here. I don't believe this is a link because when I left it as a link, it was dark blue and you couldn't read it. But here's the website. If you did a Google search for Idaho DEQ VW settlement, it would probably be the first link there. If you click subscribe to this page up in the upper right-hand corner of that window, then you can, and you input the information, you would be able to receive an automatic notification when we make the announcement for our FY21 cycle. And that way you'd know when it came out, and you would know that now is the opportunity to apply for those vehicles. And you can also email me with questions directly. If you go to the next slide, the email kind of expanded a line, but there's my email address and my phone number as well. So if you have questions about our program, how to apply, a website is a good first source because it'll have information about what's currently being offered or what the current status is. Sometimes I get behind and it's not updated, but unless you're seeing something that says we're taking applications for our 2021 cycle, you'll know that now's not the time to apply, but when that does come available, it'll be posted on this website.
Fantastic, Michael.
On the website. And then here's my email address if you want to ask any questions. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. We'll and again, like I said earlier, we'll have this recorded. So any folks on the line that want to come back and reference the material that Michael shared, the contact information, the websites, and all that, we'll have that on the recording, so you can come back and pick up that info if you didn't have a chance to write it down today. So thanks again, Michael. We really appreciate you, and good luck with the program.
You bet. Thanks.
So next up, we will have Neil Ullman, who is an energy resource professional with the state of Montana. So Neil, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to talk about the open funding opportunity that the Montana Department of Environmental Quality has through our Clean School Bus program using the EPA's Diesel Emission Reduction Act funding, the same as what Michael was just talking about over in Idaho. The funding opportunity opened up in October. Applications are due January 11th. We have just over or almost $520,000 available. And depending on the type of bus that your school district decides to select, you could be eligible for a range of funding opportunities. Eligible for DERA funding are battery electric buses. The maximum grant award for a battery electric bus is $148,500. In that, you can use that funding for charging infrastructure. The next level of funding at $31,500 are certified low and ultra low NOx emission school buses, which the Bluebird ROUSH buses are certified, as Adam talked about earlier. So if you wanted to move over to the low NOx or ultra low NOx propane buses, you'd be eligible for a higher grant level, mid-range grant level. Then we also have the EPA's diesel or DERA program. It does allow for diesel to diesel replacements, which a lot of school districts are still doing, as we've already talked about. But you can also get a propane bus at the same level. It's $22,500 grant. But talking to a lot of school districts across the state of Montana, getting some of those anecdotal stories that they've had about the reasons why they're switching over from diesel to propane are the reasons we've talked about here today. The less maintenance, lower fuel costs, how they perform in winter weather, the noise level, and then also the health benefits, not only for the students, but also the drivers and the faculty loading and offloading the kids at school. These are health issues. These NOx emissions lead to respiratory illnesses, including asthma problems and things of that nature. So moving over to a propane bus really does have a lot of benefits. At the bottom here, you can see the link to where our funding opportunity is.
Oh, it looks like Neil, you went on mute there. You must have clicked the mute there just for a second.
Sorry, I meant to enter on chat instead of on mute. What I did was I put into the chat the link to our open funding opportunity as well as the application. So if you want to take a look at that, on the next slide is my contact information. And my information is also in the request for applications. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have. Like I said earlier, the applications are due January 11th. A year ago, what we did for the first time at Montana Department of Environmental Quality is we supplemented our DERA funds from the EPA with some of the state's Volkswagen settlement money. And so that meant that we had extra money, more money, and for the first time, we were able to open it up statewide. And so any school district in the state is eligible to apply for this funding, whereas in previous years, we've been focused on school districts and counties and areas that had higher levels of air quality issues than other parts of the state. So any school district's eligible to apply. If your school district contracts for its school bus services and the school district doesn't actually own the school buses that you use, you're still eligible. The school district will have to be the one to apply, and then the district will then figure out how to reimburse its fleet contractor on how to reimburse for the cost of that bus. One application per bus, but you can submit more than one application. And again, take a look at the request for funding opportunities or request for applications, that is, and look at your eligibility level, what kind of buses you might be looking to replace. We were happy to fund a school bus at the end of last year, beginning of this year for Huntley Project, who we heard from earlier today. And there's a host of other school districts that also weren't included on the map that Ed had earlier that are moving over to propane because they're just frustrated with the diesel maintenance issues. They want to move over to propane, cleaner, quieter, cheaper, and all the things we've talked about today. So happy to answer your questions now or after we're done with this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. That was great information. Yeah, I talk with school districts all the time. So the money's out there, somebody's going to get it. So why not you, right? The applications are surprisingly easy to submit. So with regards to Wyoming, we weren't able to get anybody from the Wyoming DEQ to get on the webinar today. It's just they're still struggling like everybody is with the COVID world. And they do have some great information on their website, though. I wanted to put this up there. So this is the website where you can go and ask the state questions. So they have listed on their website that they're going to have the next round of their VW funding available in late 2020. So I'm not sure what the plan is with them, but if you'd like to get more information on what's going on, I would advise you to reach out to Alicia with Yellowstone Teton Clean Cities, or go to this website here on the screen and then ask them a question directly. And I guess I'll just ask at this time, Alicia, do you have anything to add to that?
The last time I spoke with Brian Hall at Wyoming DEQ, he mentioned that things were pushed to early 2021. So if you are signed up for our newsletter or check any of our social media avenues, we will make sure to let everybody know when when the funding is available.
Okay, perfect. That's great. And with that, we're a few minutes over. I do apologize, but I'll open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions on any of the content we covered, any questions for Michael, Neil, Marianne, Scott, Alicia or Beth, feel free to ask the question in the chat, or you can ask your question live now. If not, again, this will be recorded and all these contacts will be listed in that recording, so you could feel free to reach out to any of us directly. So do any of you have any questions? Okay, well, yeah, that being said, Beth, Alicia, do you have any final thoughts before we let everybody go?
I just wanted to say thank you to you and Ed, Marianne, Scott, everyone that presented today, and everyone that has joined to learn about propane as a fuel for school buses. We're really hopeful to get more school buses on the roads in an alternative fuel. And yeah, thank you for putting this together. It's very informative.
It's great.
And I'll just second that, what Alicia said, to keep it short and sweet here. Really appreciate all you folks at ROUSH who are involved in putting this together, and the state folks and the school district people, which I'd love to hear from, actually. Those were really great stories. Again, if you have any questions or we can help at all, you have our contact information, and please feel free to call. Thank you.
All right, everybody have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Great job, everyone.
Thank you.